Mm-hmm. Testing mic. Mm-hmm. Testing mic. Good. Okay, let's get some music going on. So yesterday we went through quite a lot of the different cards available. Most of the commons in the set, a lot of the rares, and we're still looking into some of the heroic and legendaries. So for most of the packs I'll be going through them quite quickly and stopping at any that spark my interest. So, first pack of the day. So we've got some various commons here. So this set seems to have focused on a lot of Final Fantasy IX and Final Fantasy Type 0 cards, with a bit of World of Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy IV thrown in for good measure. So this is the Gilgamesh Heroic card. I noted this one yesterday, and he has quite a few different abilities, but they're all quite a few different elements you see here. So he has a fire ability, a wind ability, an earth ability, and a lightning ability. So he could fit into many different decks which have different synergies. And the effect can be activated multiple times because he doesn't need to tap. I might consider using it in a Gilgamesh based deck, just as more Gilgameshes to use for the other Opus 1 based Gilgamesh's special abilities, because those are sweet. We've got a few nice little cards here. Cloud from Crisis Core, which is pretty cool. Sephiroth from with Dissidia Final Fantasy art, very nice. Final Fantasy Type 0. Jack we covered yesterday, but he's a very double-edged sword. Could be a very powerful, very early game minion, or early game forward. I think his drawbacks are, I think I've said this in the past, there's just not enough jacks to activate his special abilities and make him particularly useful. Moving on to the next pack. Some nice, well, I say I'm not a big fan of the PC game art. I would much prefer maybe pixel art, or even just something a bit nicer. The Type 0 stuff looks good, and the Final Fantasy 7 stuff looks good, even though it is Dirge Cerebra stuff. Here we've got another Final Fantasy Type 0 synergy card. Well, actually this one doesn't really synergize with anything, but basically if it kills a card you can deal 4,000 damage to another creature if you manage to kill something. And here, if you're using Guardian Blades, this first ability will trigger as well if you manage to kill something, or more than one thing. So say your opponent has a couple of rather big things, and quite a few small things. So, and this ability can chain off itself. So you deal 8,000 damage to one of your opponent's creatures, breaking it, and 4,000 damage, and 4,000 damage to all their other creatures. What you can do is then activate this ability, targeting something that's already damaged, and destroy that. Then this ability triggers again, because the card has been damaged by this card, and we'll just keep triggering that ability. So it's a potentially very good board clear if you can pull it off, but a bit underwhelming otherwise. And again, because there's only one Machina at the moment, there's only going to be a maximum of 3 of these in your deck, so there's only a very small chance of actually drawing your second or third Machina to be actually able to activate this ability. But still, a very powerful ability, and useful if you have a lot of card draw in your deck. So on to the next pack, again, Final Fantasy V Art. Got a few mannequin cards of various Final Fantasy characters from Dissidia, yeah. Can't imagine why the name escaped me for a minute there. So I'm actually going to talk about Yang here. So Yang combos with another card in the set called Ursula, and together they make quite a good combination, because you could play Yang, play Ursula, and then you have two 9,000 power forwards because of Yang's second ability here. And then Ursula also has a special ability which lets her deal a literal butt-ton of damage to cards your opponent controls. And that's pretty good. And from this card, and any monk or earth powering cards, could make a monk combo deck. And that's pretty good. I like the idea of that, so I'll probably be looking into that later. Sorry, I'm also piling them up as I'm opening them. Time Mage, and various other cards. Tiny commons. Get this nice holographic effect, also around the bottom of the card as well. You see here. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it's okay. So we've got a few more Type 0 cards, and a lot of Final Fantasy cards. In Final Fantasy V category, there are these Dawn Warrior cards, and they can combo off each other as Dawn Warrior cards, or they can combo off each other with different card names. There are a few more around, I just haven't got any to hand at the moment to be able to show off, but potential for a Category 5 combo deck would be very interesting, I think. So on to the next pack. That's some nice art for Vivi there. Some Type 0 cards. Was there a card I wanted to talk about? Yes. So this is a common card. Artemision. I think this is a very deceptive card. Because in the early game, it can be used to get rid of some of your late game cards and get out some more early game cards, or draw into the cards you need. And conversely, in the late game, you can get rid of your low-cost early game cards, or perhaps your combo cards that aren't needed, and draw into the ones you do need. I think it's very deceptive and very powerful. Unfortunately, you can only use it once, unless you can destroy it yourself, but still. I think it's very powerful. There's a few different cards here. Nice bit of art on shiny Black Waltz number 3. Just going to try and change the focus on the camera. That's probably the best I can get it from there. So we got some cards from Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII. And we've got Krill from Final Fantasy V. So this card's got 2 special abilities. And they are very interesting abilities, especially since they take different crystal costs. Obviously, in addition to costing another one of this card. So the first one deals 6,000 damage to all 4 your opponent controls. That's pretty good. And then if you had the mana and the cards, you could also activate the second ability if you somehow didn't manage to kill something. I wouldn't recommend it, as that's a massive investment of resources and having to do 3 colours of crystal points. But interesting as a thought exercise. So just some simple common cards. A lot of them comboed together. A couple of rare cards. So a double combo, or double effect from Phoenix. You bring a card from your break zone back to play, as well as dealing damage to all the cards that your opponents control. So it's useful for finishing off your opponent's forwards if they've been damaged that turn, and because it can be activated as a summon, so basically at any time that isn't during the damage phase or the end phase, you could use it as a sneaky pull out a card to block. Which would probably be the most interesting application of this, as well as dealing damage to all the cards your opponent controls. So Ursula is the card that combos with Yang. It's a nice little card. And again, the special ability is just pretty powerful. Choose a forward, deal it 9,000 damage if you control Yang as well. It's pretty good. But again, there's not many Ursula cards, so I think there's only this one at the moment, so you'd only have 3 in your deck. So you've got to be careful about banking everything on this ability. So the heroic in the pack I just opened, Exodus, the Judge Sao. Very interesting card. Can be very powerful. I think I said before, just make sure your opponent's able to read it before they pick a number, otherwise that's it's a bit rude. A little bit of cheating there. Because otherwise they could pick a number of one of their creatures and accidentally destroy something. And that wouldn't be nice at all. Moving on to the next pack. By the way, we got some delightful Final Fantasy X music in the background. Don't know why I chose Final Fantasy X, because we have absolutely no Final Fantasy X cards at all. But I like it, so that's why. Just going through a few of the cards here. Again, obviously commons. Shiny Angel Penance there. An interesting removal card here. Dorgan, he's a Dawn Warrior, so he combos with anything that has interacts with Dawn Warriors. I believe there is another card that can bring Dawn Warriors out into the field for free. So that's very interesting. Interesting potential there, but basically you can remove this card from the game, and you choose another forward, and remove that from the game as well. Very powerful single target removal, as it can get rid of pretty much anything, as long as it can be targeted by abilities. That's a key thing there. If a card can't be targeted by abilities of other cards, then it can't be removed by this card. But 3 crystals, 6,000 power isn't anything to sniff at. It's very efficient and good for the early game and late game. Quina. So big. Ah, very interesting. Okay. I haven't seen this card yet, but legendary Zac. So 5 crystal, 8,000 power, fire. When Zac enters the field, all forwards you control gain 2,000 power until the end of your turn, or until the end of their turn. When Zac is put from the field into the break zone, you will search for a cloud of 4 or less and add it to your hand, or play it onto the field dull. So that could be the one in this set, which I handily happen to have in this pack. Or it could be one of the other clouds. I believe there is a light cloud, but I think he is 6 crystal points, not 4. The special cloud is also 6 crystal points, but it's reduced by cards on the field. Well, that wouldn't affect this. And finally, I think there is a common cloud, but he doesn't really have much effect. So you'd probably be looking for this cloud here. So Zac has an okay effect. It's useful for getting clouds if you need to activate your light clouds abilities or other clouds abilities. But there is that. If you put it into your hand, and just giving everything plus 2000 power until end of turn, that's okay. I like it. As a legendary though, I've seen more powerful. I'll leave that there though. That one's shiny, so it's nice. So all the mannequins tend to have imitation abilities of the cards they're imitating. I think I've seen this one before, but we'll go over it here. When Brandless enters the field, you may search for a card named Segwardes or Pelennor and add it to your hand. And for each of those cards you control, you gain 1000 power. So, pretty standard. EX is nice, because then you can search for one of those cards. I think EXs can be underrated sometimes. It's especially useful if, for example, one of these cards has a special ability. So if they have a special ability, getting some into your hand would be very useful for being able to trigger those. So into the next pack. And we have another legendary. So we have Kuja. Wow. That is a very powerful ability. In fact, those may be some of the most powerful abilities that I've seen in this game. Being able to dull one of your opponent's forwards when you're attacking is fantastic. Being able to freeze it as well, because remember, it's not choose this or choose that, this effect triggers. So when he attacks, you choose a forward and you can then pay 1, and if you do so, you dull it. When Kuja attacks, choose a forward, and it doesn't have to be the same forward. That's very important. And then you can freeze it. So you could dull one of your opponent, when it attacks, you can pay 1, dull one of your opponent's forwards, and they will not be able to block. And then you could freeze another one of your opponent's even bigger creatures, or creatures that are forwards that are giving you trouble, and stop them from activating in the next turn and attacking. And that's extremely powerful. And especially to have both those abilities on one card, with the downside that he has to attack, so if your opponent has lots of big creatures, lots of big forwards that can block this, then you're going to be losing it, and that would be a bad. But still, legendary rarity, legendary abilities. Very cool. Bard, alright. What's the rest of them? Morning out.
I'm down to a really good day.
So I just want to talk about this Odin card. Obviously, it's very good with a Zero Cadet-esque deck, and being able to deal 7,000 damage is very powerful in a normal deck. And then if you have a Zero Class Cadet, you can just destroy a card. Destroy a card, any card. It's a very powerful effect, especially as an Odin that was able to destroy any forward was 7 mana in the previous set. And this one's only a rare. A very powerful effect for a rare card. There are other summons in this set that have that work with zero job class Zero Cadets. Yeah, that's it. It's job class Zero Cadet, and there's a couple more summons that work with that specifically as well. A nice little card, though I probably wouldn't run it in anything but a class Zero Cadet deck. So we have a Garland card, so during your turn, so if Garland is blocking, for example, if he takes damage or damage from a summon, you reduce that damage by 2,000. And then you can use his special ability and pay X amount of mana, or X amount of crystal points. You choose the forward and deal it 6,000 power, 6,000 damage and 1,000 more for each crystal point that you pay. So if you pay 4, then you're going up to 10,000 power damage. We'll just be right back in a second. Right. So Garland, interesting little card, but I think there are other Garland cards available, so it makes his special ability slightly better. But it's paying an awful lot just to be dealing with one specific card, so I'm not the biggest fan. Just going through the commons here. And we have Kefka. So I've saw this one yesterday, but I'll talk about it a bit more again today. So if you control, if you control 3 or more different elements, or different element backups, Kefka gains 3,000 power. And if you control 5 or more different element backups, Kefka gains Brave. Now there is a backup that can also produce elements of your opponents, so that could be a way to do it, but to be honest, 2 crystal points for 5,000 isn't particularly appealing. And by the late point in the game that you're going to be being able to play this card, it's just not impactful enough. And I don't see it being a particularly good card. What we do have here is a summon called Sildra, and Sildra can basically return up to 2 of your opponent's forwards back to their hands. So it's very similar to another summon in Opus 1 called Leviathan, which was able to put 1 forward your opponent controls back to their hand. But this is just very useful for getting in that final hit that you need to win the game. Although at 6 crystal, it's 3 times more expensive than Leviathan, which was only 2 crystal points. So it's definitely a late game card. So here we have Genesis, who is from Crisis Core, not from Dirge of Cerebus, which I was saying yesterday, because I'm a terrible person. And I really like the effects on this card for 4 crystal points. So when he comes in, basically removes one of your opponent's forwards from play for 2 turns, your current turn and the next turn. And when he deals damage, your opponent has to discard cards. And if they're playing it very close to an empty hand for most turns, then this can be a very powerful effect. Making your opponent have to choose between some of maybe their combo effects, their more powerful cards. Very interesting little card. I like it, and I think it fit well into a lot of ice-themed decks where your main objective is to freeze or dull your opponent's cards. Also, it's a legendary, which is nice. I think I have 3 of those now. Might be dull and freeze in time. Nice bit of ice on those cards. So Zeramosta Condemner. So you choose a forward from your break zone, return it to your hand, and then you deal damage to one of your opponent's forwards equal to the power of the forward that you just put in the break zone. So for example, you could discard a powerful card to pay for the cost of this summon. And then, as part of the effect, you would then put that back into your hand and deal that damage to one of your opponent's forwards, thus paying for itself and meaning you don't have to lose that very good late game card. Interesting little effect, but very expensive. Although as an EX burst, that'd be incredibly powerful, being able to bring a card back to your hand and deal with one of your opponent's cards. So the thing I thought was one yesterday, but it's Sid from Final Fantasy Type 0. And you choose one for your opponent controls, and if your opponent has no cards in their hand, you break it. Now, the odds of your opponent having no cards in their hand is, well, it'd be extremely low, to be honest. But if you're playing a very discard heavy deck, it might be possible. Though you'd have to basically just go for that. Thank you. You'd have to go for that pretty much exclusively, and when you're banking on discarding all of your opponent's cards, it's a strategy. It's not a particularly good strategy. Not in my books. So here we have Faris. Faris basically has card synergy with two cards, Sildra and Lena. Pretty okay cards. Can get up to 9,000 power with Lena in play. It's alright. Quite expensive though. I don't remember seeing the two cards that I mentioned on there, but I'm sure they're in here somewhere. My knowledge of Final Fantasy V isn't the best. Ah yes, I'll get to Kelger in a second. So Kelger is a Final Fantasy V card, and he is one where helps with a lot of Dawn Warrior job synergy. So when he enters the field, you can then play another Dawn Warrior from your hand onto the field. For 6 mana, it's expensive, but it's a very good ability, as a lot of Dawn Warriors are 3 to 4 crystal points. So personally, I think that's quite a good little ability. And another heroic rarity card in this deck, or in this pack, sorry, Trey. He's a bit tricky to use, but if you have cards that can activate or dull other cards that you control, then you can do some very tricky little maneuvers. So for example, if he's active and targeted by a summon, if you're able to dull him, then that summon effect is just completely gone. As if nothing ever happened. So just going back to Faris for a moment. I said I couldn't seem to find any of these ones because I was looking in the wrong piles. So Lena is a water forward, and when it enters the field, you can play another water forward from your graveyard onto the field. And for 4 mana and a special ability, you can choose a forward other than a light or dark in your break zone and play it onto the field. That's pretty good. That's pretty good indeed. The combo potential there is very interesting, but again, there hasn't been any other Lena cards printed as far as I'm aware. So being able to play Rise is going to be a very situational situation. I'm sorry, I was distracted for a second and lost my train of thought. Although it was already derailing, so it's probably fine. Need to find a Sildra card and see what that does, because Sildra may very well combo with Lena as well. That would be very interesting. Oh, of course, Sildra is the summon that can return 2 forwards to your opponent's hand. So being able to search for it and put it into your hand is actually pretty good. Also, Lena is a legendary rarity card, so being able to buy one of those is going to be very expensive. Ooh, shiny Freya. So here we have one of the first in the game dark summons. Zodiac, Keeper of Precepts. So if you control a dark forward, this costs 3 less to play. And what do we get for a 7 mana dark summon? Well, we break all the forwards the opponent controls. And then we take damage for every forward broken by this effect. It's a very high risk versus reward card. On one hand, you can get rid of all your opponent's forwards, but you may very well set yourself to 1 point away from dying. Playing this out, we'll see how good this is. I imagine it's very good against very slower control decks that only play a few forwards, but very powerful forwards, and will be absolutely terrible against decks that, I don't know, want lots of parties, have lots of small creatures or 4 small forwards. Its effectiveness remains to be seen. But interestingly, you can play it when you have another dark card on the field, so that's good. Speaking of good, we have another Garnet that we saw yesterday. Garnet cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons. When you cast a summon, all forwards you control gain 1000 power, and if you pay 2 water, you can cast a summon of cost 3 or less from your hand without paying its cost. So, potential savings. Also potentially paying summons outside of your colour, because it doesn't say cast a water summon, it casts any summon. So if there's a particular effect in red, for example, that you need, you can just put that into your deck, and then once you pull out this card, you can play its effect for 2 water crystal points. I'm sure that has some interesting applications, and it's a very powerful card for just 3 mana and 7,000 power. Very efficient. I like it quite a bit. All sorts of commons. Moogle from Class 0 is a special card. So this is just a shiny of the special card in that deck. And the heroic rarity card here is Guido. Guido does not activate during your active phase, it costs mana to activate, but has a very helpful, for example, once a turn, or possibly more than once a turn if you have enough crystal points. So you pay a blue to activate it, and then you pay 2 and tap it, and put one of your opponent's powerful forwards on top of their deck. So if you can somehow generate 6 CP per turn, you could put 2 of your opponent's powerful cards back on top of the deck, and then when it comes to their draw phase, because they draw 2 cards a turn, they just draw those cards again. So you know 2 cards in their hands, and you're also denying them drawing into new cards that they could use for combo pieces, they could use for like other powerful effects, maybe summons. Or, if you're able, you can put a forward on top of your opponent's deck and then damage them. And then that, in a very roundabout way, puts that forward into the break zone. I just thought of that, but that's actually a quite neat thing to do. A cute thing to do. That's enough of you. And here we have another legendary. But this one unfortunately doesn't have all the jobs, but we'll let it slide. So but Bartz does have the jobs of the forwards that you control. If Bartz has 3 jobs or more, he has haste and first strike. And if he has 5 or more jobs, he has 3,000 power plus 3,000 power brave and can attack twice in the same turn. I like that. Although I'd need a ruling on whether his freelancer job counts towards these 3 jobs or more. I'm going to say it does. So really you only need 2 other cards on the field, or 2 other forwards on the field with different jobs, and then Bartz has haste and first strike. Or another 5 or more, and yeah. So 4 other, well, having to get out 4 other forwards. I'd be interested to see if they need to have different jobs. So it could be that Bartz is a freelancer, standard unit, standard unit, standard unit, standard unit. And that would be 5 or more jobs. But maybe that only counts for 1, so he'd be a freelancer and a standard unit. Maybe need some clarification on that. I think personally. And the other card in that pack, Zalera, the Death Seraph. So I don't think I went through that yesterday, but all these numbers here are prime numbers. So it's a very powerful effect to be able to deal with cards of all these costs, though I haven't seen any 11 or 13 cost yet. whether that would be something that's that powerful. I'd expect to be a game-ending effect. But it also goes towards the summon in the game as well, or the thing that Eidolon's in Final Fantasy XII. Yeah. So he's an Eidolon in the game, and when you're fighting him, I think his effects are to cast various deaths at various levels.
Don't remember that one.
Don't remember exactly, but
that is a common effect in Final Fantasy.
it is a common effect in Final Fantasy, so we could say it's very flavourful. Although I like the potential of Bart as well. And because he has all those jobs, for example, if you have a Dragoon, or a Monk synergy, or a Ninja synergy deck, when he's on the field, he can also use all those effects as well. So if you're something that's powering up ninjas, and there's a ninja on the field, he's a ninja as well, etc. I was going to say something ridiculous like, if you play the Barts with all the jobs, then this Bart would have all the jobs. So that would be 5 or more jobs, but you can't play 2 Barts at once. But we can dream. So another Zeramustic Demo, we've seen him. So we've got more Palom and Porom cards in this set, which will be very useful for comboing with the Palom and Porom in Opus 2. And basically, he increases damage dealt to all forwards. That's including yours as well, so you have to be very careful about that. By 1,000 damage. So if you have a summon that deals 4,000 damage, it would deal 5,000 damage. If you hit someone with Palom, he would deal 8,000 damage. But conversely, he would then take 1,000 extra damage. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword there, but can kind of power up your cards. But bear in mind, it doesn't up their power. So if something with 6,000 power, and I'm going to try to think of a good example. Okay, so if something with 6,000 power blocks Palom, his power would increase to 7,000, but the damage dealt would increase by 1,000, but his power would still be 6,000. So, for example, you could still meteor them. It's a bit weird. And I just realised that meteor also combos with this first effect, so when I first read it I was like, 6,000, 4,000, 2,000? Bah, that's not particularly good. But then, now I realise it's 7,000, 5,000, 3,000, so it's still not that good. With the goal for most control-y decks being to get up to like 9,000 plus power, I can't see that being particularly effective. I would use this in a deck where I'm comboing with the Palom card that basically has the special ability of being able to deal 1 damage to your opponent, and using that. I like the art for Black Waltz too. And we have another legendary card, and this one is Deleter from Final Fantasy Tactics. So we saw him yesterday, but basically if he's targeted by a summon, you deal a point of damage to your opponent, and if he's targeted by an ability of one of your opponent's characters, so that's backups or forwards, then he breaks that character. The effect will still take place, but he breaks them. So, and he's 5 crystal for 9,000 power, which is pretty good. So a very powerful effect there, which isn't even a special ability. Very impressive, and I see a lot of decks just throwing him in for just these 2 very powerful abilities. Bear in mind that's only things that your opponents control, so you can still target it with your stuff. I was just double checking that because I was afraid it would be like, oh no, you can't target it with your stuff either. Another Faris card. And a Prish. Oh hey, a new Prish. That's nice. This one's this Dissidia Far Fancy form. Let's see if it's as broken as the first Prish.
Fuck you, buddy.
When Prish is put from the field onto the break zone, you may play a card named Prish from your hand onto the field. Yes, it is just as broken as the first Prish. Because you can play the silly Prish onto the field. Wow. And that special ability isn't too bad either. Choose the dole forward and break it. And you don't even need to tap to do that. So there are Prishes available in Opus 1, so you could potentially have 6 Prishes in your deck. Or a lot of nullifying dropkicks. Calling her the abhorrent one is probably very accurate. I believe I'm getting flipped off. Overall, a very powerful card that would fit nicely into pretty much any deck, especially if it has lots of Prish. Broken. The Prish from Opus 1 has caused me a lot of trouble in the past, which is why now, rather than trying to kill it, we just go around it. Here we have one of the light cards from this set, Minerva. So Minerva, what does she do? Well, she does a whole mess of things. First of all, she has 10,000 power. Just 10,000 power, because she can, because she's a goddess. You can't read that, but it says that. 7, cost 7, but for these effects I think you can agree it's pretty good. So at the beginning of your main phase 1, so you draw your cards and then you basically choose one of your abilities here. All the forwards you control gain plus 3,000 power. So this is 13,000, just if you want it to be. And then all your other cards are very powerful as well. All characters opponent controls lose their abilities until the end of turn, so that's special abilities, that's board-wide abilities, that's all their abilities. And then, or you can just draw another card if you need to get that last combo piece, if you need to really get some extra cards for crystal point generation. Those are your options. Very powerful card. So again, we just have another Calgar card. What we have found a bit strange is there's a couple of cards like this. So obviously Rydia is from Final Fantasy IV, but the artwork is from Lords of Vermilion, which is another card game. So we have a card game art for another card game, which is also a category in another card game. Card gameception, perhaps. And it chooses you a summon. So you can pick out a summon from your deck that's right for the situation. Very handy. A lot of these may fit into current deck archetypes that people have created, but obviously we have all these Class 0 cadets that could make a deck. Just very, very impressive. We've seen it on some of the other cards, but there's some new mechanics for these cards on some of these cards where it does extra stuff for every card in your hand or every card in your opponent's hand. And so this Black Waltz, when it enters the field, deals 3,000 damage, plus 1,000 more damage for each card in your opponent's hand. So that should be when that ability resolves. So if your opponent is able to, I don't know, do something in response to it, he can just try to reduce the number of cards in his hand to reduce the damage that gets done to his forward. Or your forward, you know, if you're trying to destroy one of your forwards for some reason. Oh no, it says forward opponent control, so you cannot target your own thing with it. Another thing that we've seen a lot of in Opus 3 is ninjas. So many ninjas. Enough ninjas that when we combine it with other ninjas, get ninjas for days.
Ninjas!
Just so. And so we end up with potentially a lot of ninja synergy for a ninja. Maybe not a combo deck, but definitely a synergistic deck. Down to our last couple of packs. Have we got anything interesting? Well, we've got lots of commons again. Shiny Arc Fiend card. And we've got the Lightning in this set. With the always delightful to look at City of Final Fantasy art. So this Lightning can get you an Odin out of your break zone, put it on top of your deck, and as part of her ability you can also discard the Odin, a Lightning, and two crystal points, choose up to 2 forwards of cost 4 or less, and just break them. Just like that. 5 crystal points for 8,000 power isn't particularly good, but if you're managing to pull off this ability here to get an Odin back to your hands, and that shows that represents a lot of value, especially since you could just play that, use the Odin as more crystal generation for other cards you may need to play more urgently in that situation. And obviously you can also use this Lightning towards other Lightning's special abilities. For example, in Opus 1, the Lightning that has Army of One. So we have another Final Fantasy Tactics character, who is also a legendary character. Ramza. So for each Final Fantasy Tactics forward you control other than Ramza, this particular one gains 1,000 power. And for 3 crystal points you can choose a Final Fantasy Tactics forward you control, and it gains 1,000 power, haste, and first strike. So you could, if you had 6 crystal points to use, obviously you use them as you generate them as you need to use them. So you pay free, play Ramza, pay another free, activate this ability on itself, and you have at the very least a 8,000 haste first strike character. If you have more Final Fantasy Tactics characters, then it's just going to get more powerful. And if you have lots of extra crystal points, you can activate this ability again and again to give different characters more power and first strike, or just keep buffing up the same character. So you could activate it 3 times and make Ramza a 10,000 first strike hasted. Well, a 10,000 power haste first strike forward. And the last pack we have just has a common holographic card and a Feral Chaos. So Feral Chaos is, as you can read here, utter pandemonium. He has 10,000 power as well. He has haste, first strike and brave. And when he attacks or blocks, you have to select one of a character that you control and put it into the break zone. So extremely powerful card, especially for 5 crystal points, but with a hefty drawback. And with that, that's the second Opus 2 box that I have. Have a good day.